but you've been to enough of our town halls that you know how these things work.
They're marvelous and efficient.
What's marvelous?
Hey, George. Oh, you're on mute.
Hey, Dyke.
How are you? Would you have a minute after this meeting to give me a buzz?
Sure. On the cell?
Yes.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. Nice beard, by the way.
Oh,
That must be a COVID beard.
something like that.
Something like that.
He's just been enjoying his summer vacation off from policing our BMA meetings.
I have missed them.
And getting ready for retirement. When's the last day, George?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, you're a little hard to hear.
Oh.
December 31st.
Are you excited?
I think that's an understatement, but yes.
Well, accomplishing that expansion is a great legacy to leave on.
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to see that through.
Cameron,
Yes, ma'am.
and Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
it's 5 o'clock, and I'll let you know that we do have at least 5 board members on line right now.
very, very good. Thank you, Sheila. Just as a reminder, this is the executive session of the Planning Commission. And anyone who is joining us, please mute yourself and also mute the camera or close the camera unless we're asking a question of you as an individual. So just FYI. Before we start, Tim, I see that you're on, and I wanted to make a comment that how nice Forest Hill Irene Road looks. You and your team have done an excellent job with it.
Thank you for that. I'll pass along your congratulations. And again, thank you.
Well, I know you guys were on a tough deadline to get everything done, and with the school opening, and kudos, because I think you guys did an excellent, excellent job.
Thank you again.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, I just want to let everybody know that this is streaming right now, and I am about to start recording this meeting as well. So just want all on the meeting to know that we are streaming and we are about to record.
Very
Cameron,
good.
Cameron, can you hear me? This is
Yes,
Richard.
we can hear you, Mr. Marsh.
Okay, thank you. I got my mic fixed.
Perfect.
So I think we've got everybody, and the first item is first I think everybody knows that the Skinner property was withdrawn. Is that correct? Or postponed?
That it was withdrawn for this meeting, and they will be coming back for the October meeting.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the rezoning of 7271 Neshoba. And Sheila, are you doing that, or is Sarah doing it?
Yes, sir. I am actually the planner that will be handling the Neshoba rezoning. This is an application that was before you in subcommittee in December of 2019. It is the request for a rezoning of a 7.46 acre parcel of property located on the south side of Neshoba Road. The applicant is asking to rezone the property from the R low density single family residential to the R1 medium density single family residential district. As you know from the zoning maps that you've seen in the past, the property to the north and to the east of the site are single-family residential R zoning district, but the properties that are to the south of this site and to the southwest of the site are R zoned in the R1 district, which is the medium density residential. If this zoning is approved, this application is required to come back for a site plan approval before the Planning Commission and the Design Review Commission, if applicable to the proposed application that is submitted. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
There were some issues regarding the drainage when they came before us before.
Yes, sir. Those are issues that were with the site plan, the conceptual site plan that they submitted. However, the concept site plan itself, the creation of a cove with 7 lots, as you see that it's in your packet, does meet the bulk requirements of the zoning district for the R1. When it comes back for a site plan, whether a subdivision or planned development, at that time, we will be looking at the drainage issues and some of the other site plan issues at that point in time.
Very good. Commissioners, questions?
Sheila, this is Richard. Do we have examples that you could share of roughly similar types of arrangements to this one that have been done in the recent past? With the road along the side, similar.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did hear that. Richard, your microphone seemed to be malfunctioning again.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
That better?
Okay. Are you, you're asking about infill development in which the road alignment would be behind, directly behind existing lots? Is that what you?
Right.
We don't have, I don't have any recent examples of that. But there are examples where there have been infill developments adjacent to new lots. One of the things that we will be looking at is the road alignment and whether in the location that they have it as part of the site plan is the best place and whether it should be flipped or not. But we would look at that as part of the site plan itself.
Okay. Yeah, to me, I don't know. It just feels a little awkward, having the road aligned in the way that it is along the side with all the lots on one side of the road and then backing up to the adjacent properties. I know we've discussed that a little bit in the previous discussions, but I just was curious if we had any other examples where that's worked out.
And I would remind the board, when you approve a rezoning, you are not approving the concept plan. You are only approving the use and bulk requirements for the property. A site plan is required to come back that will come before you to look at that time and making a determination of whether the layout is appropriate.
Thank you.
Richard, this is David Clark. Kaler's Woods off of Dogwood is a similar situation where it's one road, homes all face one direction. Not exactly the same, but I think would kind of answer your question.
Similar, yes.
Similar, yeah.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one at Kimbrough and Dogwood, David?
Yes, sir. Kimbrough and Dogwood.
Sheila, have we had any response from the neighbors?
Yes, sir. I was going to bring this up at the actual hearing, but we've received 2 letters, one in opposition, one in support, but we received at least 12 email or phone calls just inquiries about what is being proposed for the site.
Good. Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had just a quick comment. So Sheila, when an applicant, granted, we're not approving a plan, a site plan tonight, but the purpose of an applicant submitting a concept plan along with their rezoning request is to give us some idea how the change of that zoning could be what the results of the change of that zoning would be on the subject property. Is that correct?
That is correct. And in
And-
this case, that road could be flipped on either side and you would still be able to get lots that conform with the bulk requirements for the R1 district.
But other than Taylor Woods, I mean, we've had some other applications that have created a double frontage like this. Taylor Woods, there's no, I mean, it does create a double frontage, but there are no existing homes on those lots. This is creating a double frontage with an existing home.
It would be if that is the site plan that they bring back, yes.
Okay. I mean, we've had applications that have been similar to this, and it's just problematic, obviously. I wouldn't want a street in my backyard personally, but I mean.
One thing to consider, if you look at this property, there is a large parcel located to the east of this site. There could be a combination of those parcels. Anything could happen when it comes back for an actual site plan once the zoning is in place.
Would you expound on that, Sheila?
Right now, the property is 7 acres in size. Adjacent to it to the east side is another large parcel. We have seen a sketch plan that included both parcels. However, that is not before you, and we are not sure whether that's going to come forward. But it could come forward, and if that happens, then that would change the whole design of both this lot and the lot to the east. And you may not see double frontage lots at that point in time.
So we could ask the applicant tonight what their plans are for that other parcel?
You can ask if that is something that's going to come forward if you would like.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Sheila.
Certainly, George.
Sheila, by the same token, and I know this is hypothetical, but if that lot to the east were not included in this project, could the road and the alignment of the homes be flipped over such that the road would be on the east side of the property line instead of the west, and therefore only impact one lot instead of 3 or 4?
It could be, but one of the things that we'll have to look at has to be the grading of the site. And Mr. Guadney is online, so he may want to come in on the change in the topography. But that is something that could happen, and it may be that they have to either build it up or cut that site down, whatever, to make the alignment of the road work on the east side instead of on the west side. That is a concern and something that we talked about as part of both the TAC meeting and the PC subcommittee in December. So the applicant is very aware about our issue with the double frontage lots and about the road, new road coming in behind some existing residential. Tim, do you want to add something?
I can. I mean, it'll be hypothetical since we don't see a grading and drainage plan before us tonight, but there'll be drainage issues even with the plan that is before you tonight. And there's drainage issues with any other configuration too. But I mean, there's nothing that cannot be overcome. It'll just be worked out during the design phase.
Sheila, do I recall there was some discussion about saving mature trees on that east side of the property line? Or am I thinking about something else?
You may remember that we did talk about one of the requirements of a subdivision or even a planned development, residential development, is that they have to provide us with a tree preservation plan. And we will be looking at issues of tree mitigation as part of that review and approval for the site plan.
I mean, I know it may or may not ultimately be, the particular preference we have, but I mean, when you look at that site and the adjacent property, it would seem like in a perfect world, the optimal development would be to develop both sites together and have a cove running right up the middle, which would make it conform much more consistently with the adjacent neighborhood that's zoned in the same, with the same zoning to the east and south. I don't know. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with some of that, but anyway, that's just for what it's worth.
Sheila, is there other R1 zoning nearby?
Yes, sir. The property to the south of this site is zone R1, immediately to the south. And also the property to the southwest of the site is zone R1.
Thank you. Other questions? We want to go to the second item.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Hear you fine, Sarah.
Okay, thanks. My internet kept crashing. So if it crashes in the middle, Sheila might have to jump in. So, okay, thank you. The next item before you is the cell tower at the Office Depot property. This project came before you last month. And at that time, the board did request that there be additional consideration given to a couple aspects of the project. One was that the board, that the applicant consider the aesthetics of the project. And that is one aspect of that was related to the equipment enclosure, that the materials be similar to what the building is, the Office Depot building, that be it brick or have brick columns. That was one aspect that the commission requested. And they also said that the visual impact to the area would be somewhat significant, as this would be the highest structure around, and this is a gateway to the city. So the commission requested that the applicant also explore alternative sites. The applicant did submit a revised package, and in that revised package, there were additional photo simulations that showed the actual height of the tower from many different angles where it can be seen and cannot be seen. They also submitted updated plans that show the equipment enclosure as being CMU brick. The applicant did not speak to whether or not they explored other sites. So I will let the applicant discuss that. If you would like, I can bring up any images that you would like to see at this time. If you would like to see any of the photo simulations or any of the coverage maps, I'm happy to do that.
Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, this is Keith Saunders.
Go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to ask Sarah, you mentioned that they had several visual of coming in, but they didn't show anything coming down Wolf River Boulevard in either direction. How that, the only one they showed at any distance was coming across the Wolf River Bridge there on Germantown heading south. And, they didn't show anything. They showed one there at the intersection, and I didn't find any. I could be wrong, but, coming either direction on Wolf River Boulevard, I would have liked to see what that is. It's
There are a few. I will try to present the items and see if I can bring up those for you. Okay. You should be able to see a presentation. So just one moment.
We can see it.
I gotta try to advance it. Just one second. So this is the view at the Office Depot. Again, at the Office Depot. This is coming down Germantown Road, right before the Waffle House.
Is anyone else seeing that? I just see the title slide.
I can
There
see
you
it.
go. Now I do, thank you.
Okay, this is again on Germantown Road heading south on the bridge. This is on Germantown Road heading north, right just south of the intersection of Wolf River Boulevard and Germantown Road. It says that it's the intersection of Wolf River Circle and Wolf River Boulevard, but to me, it almost seems like this image is on Wolf River Boulevard going east before you hit Germantown Road.
I believe you're correct, Sarah. I didn't see that in the package.
Yeah. And then this is at the Courtyard Hotel. This is then also taken from Wolf River Boulevard going west. You see the Taco Bell there. And then this also is at Wolf River Boulevard heading west right at the intersection where the Exxon station is. And then this is at Wolf River Circle and Wolf River Boulevard. You can see across at the very rear of in the background of the photo at the River Center Shopping Center. So this is one on Wolf River Boulevard as well, right before the intersection to Germantown Road. And this is then Germantown Road heading north before the intersection of Germantown Road and Wolf River Boulevard with the Retreat Apartments. And there were additional photo simulations in the packet. All the photo simulations were included. These were the main ones which showed where you cannot see the tower and where you can see the tower.
Sarah, you indicated that also had some pictures of the enclosure.
Yes. So here you can see a little bit of what the enclosure would look like. This is if you're at the Courtyard Hotel. That's a photo simulation of the enclosure. And then let me bring up the site plan that shows the enclosure as well. Here is a site plan, an elevation view of what the enclosure would look like.
Is there split-faced block anywhere on the adjacent building?
So there is the adjacent building. At the top of it, there is, you can see the bottom half is brick, and then the top half is that split-face CMU.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Certainly, Doug.
Sarah, we specifically, in the last meeting, we specifically asked for a study of alternatives.
Correct.
Did the applicant not, has the applicant not prepared alternatives, and is the applicant not going to present alternatives tonight, to your knowledge?
That was not included as part of the letter of intent or the images submitted.
That was a very, very specific request.
It was iterated to the applicant.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
question.
Certainly, George.
Sarah, could you please, once we're finished with the enclosure, could you pull up the coverage map for me, please?
Yes. So here are the two coverage maps. The one to the left is the existing as it is right now. The one to the right is after this tower would be built.
On my screen, I don't see any distinction, but perhaps it's in the packet that I could see it.
Are others seeing the two different images side by side? Okay.
Yes.
There is another image that was included in the packet. This one here, this is the post after. This shows the tower that is proposed at the intersection of Wolf River Boulevard and Germantown Road. And then it also shows the recently approved tower on Neshoba Road in the MLG&W transmission tower. This map, though, does not take into account the effect of the additional coverage that that tower would provide. It's just showing you where it is.
Sir, I truly believe they should have included that simply because, their whole premise of putting this one here was two reasons. Number one is it gave it much better coverage over, and secondly, it gave the opportunity to provide more vendors on the tower. And to me, you have two towers there, almost three towers that are going down that high tension power line, TVA or MLG&W, I don't know which one owns that. That to me looks like two out of the three serve it just as well without having something that's 140 feet up in the air beside two buildings. It looked like I don't know what, but I have a hard time not considering this, Mr. Chairman, without some form of study made by them and reason why that they can't locate this on a coexisting tower.
So Mr. Saunders, I do have another image that I can show you. It's not part of the formal presentation, but I went back and found the coverage maps from the Neshoba cell tower. The Neshoba cell tower is in an MLG&W transmission tower. It is also a Verizon tower, and the coverage maps were prepared by the same engineer. These are the coverage maps for that focus specifically on the Neshoba area. So if you see to the left, that's the, they call it Forgy Park. It's not in Forgy Park, but it's the tower on Neshoba Road. And then to the right would be after that tower is constructed.
And going back to the other one, if you look at that, the only yellow that they taken away from it was down there towards the Wolf River and a small portion over there towards Campbell Clinic and through that area.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So if you look at that map and you look at the Neshoba coverage map, it seems to me, yes, if you would, Sarah, go back to,
Yeah.
It seems to me that, and just, looking at the maps, looking at the coverage maps, that this new tower would accomplish a greater goal by being located further east. I mean, that's, if you look now, once the Neshoba tower is constructed and it dramatically improves a huge area, this tower being right on Germantown Road, it just looks to me like it should be located east of Germantown Road. I mean, that's where the lack of service is. I mean, just studying this.
I agree with you, Dyke. It looks like if it went towards the southeast there, back up towards there, you would take in a tremendous amount of residential area that doesn't have much service. Yep. And I would think you could accomplish that with a lesser height and tower also, due to the fact that I don't know what Sarah, can you tell me what the height of the tower is on that one we're seeing now that's in that MLG transmission tower?
I believe it's 125 feet to the midpoint of the antenna. So around 128 to the peak.
Okay. So, taking that in consideration, finding, and as you go further south towards Poplar, you gain also elevation in the topography. So looks like to me a tower of 125 feet somewhere back towards this direction would be certainly much more desirable than putting this one at the location they're looking at. I'm having a hard time justifying putting this antenna there if this one serves this well of coverage.
Well, Mr. Saunders, frankly, I mean, there's still going to be gaps. So, Sarah, would you go back to the applicant's coverage map? There's still gaps over there on Wolf River Boulevard. So
further west, yeah.
Well, there's gaps further west, but there's gaps further east. So
absolutely,
it seems like to me, if the tower was moved further east, you would eliminate those big gaps right there, those big service gaps right there. I mean,
I agree with you.
We're not cell tower location experts, but we can sure look at these maps, and it seems sort of basic to me, unless I'm missing something.
Well, I think those are good questions for us to bring up to the applicant when we see them at 6 o'clock.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Certainly.
What is, Sarah, what is the tower that you're showing right there, the easternmost tower? What location is that again?
The easternmost tower?
Is that a tower location there with the red circle?
Yes. That is in Cameron Brown Park. That's the stealth tower that's in the little loop of the greenway, right before the greenway, behind the baseball fields.
Perfect. Thank you.
Is that a Verizon tower?
I would have to check and see, but I would assume so, because this is Verizon's coverage map, and I think they would only show where they have antennas.
That's also a stealth tower, which has all the antennas inside of it. It looks like a enlarged flagpole that goes up. So, you don't have all that antenna sticking out there, even though the antennas are smaller now. I think that particular one serves about 3 clients down there. So I'm sure Verizon, AT&T, and someone else is probably on there. But to me, something along that line, would be much more aesthetically pleasing than having a 140-foot tower up there with a bunch of antennas sitting around it. Which they're only showing you one level. I assure you there's a second level antennas that can be put on there also. And I do have some cell tower experience. I put up quite a few of these for Cellular South back when they first started.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions or maybe some comments. Sarah, I'm looking at the, and I think it was the comment was made about expertise and that type thing for cellular coverage. I don't qualify for that level of expertise, besides knowing when my call gets dropped. I know that's bad. So I'm looking at the coverage map on, I'm going to just say it's on page 14 of my packet, and it's got the pre and the post. And I'm not comparing color schemes, but, just keep in mind that area is very dense and it's populated with a lot of healthcare. To me, it does improve coverage a lot, because I see a lot of yellow go away, and the yellow that's to the north is all around the Lucius Birch natural area. So there's really no need for coverage there. And I do applaud the commissioners for their willingness to really dig into this deeper. I think that as we look at things over the last 6 or 7 years, we've made a real effort to do our best to try to improve cellular coverage in our community for a litany of reasons. And, we have extended the height requirement from 100 feet to 140. We have approved some co-located sites and some freestanding sites. At the end of the day, and again, I do realize the aesthetic value is important, but, for this one commissioner and this one mayor, I'm starting to have to really come to grips with the value of public safety. When there are less than 10% of people with a landline, and I haven't had one in 15 years, and 90% of I think 90+% of our EMS calls are fielded on cellular, and then all the data transfer in our Wolf River Medical Corridor is pretty important. I remember in one of our planning commission meetings, we had a couple people speak that primarily were having, I want to say, their heart monitored via cellular devices. And, that's pretty critical stuff right now. What I did was, for my own personal viewpoint, besides seeing these, I guess, the enhancements of what the tower would look like at different angles, if you ever come back from a visit to Shelby Farms, or from the lake there and coming down Germantown Road, any time of the year, whether the canopy of trees is dense or if it's in the dead of winter, when you're coming down Germantown Road and you come underneath the Walnut Grove overpass, the things that you notice are our two water towers. And then as you get closer and closer to the Bobby Lanier Bridge and the Wolf River, you don't see those things anymore. And, you know, if you're going to put a cell tower somewhere, you know, we've already fought the battle of not doing it in a neighborhood. If anything, to me, it needs to go in commercial areas where there is less visual pollution. You know, I think if we were laying out the city again in the 60s and 70s like we did at one time, we would have had the foresight to maybe put utility easements and be able to predict that cellular phones would be prevalent. But, you know, in the 60s and 70s, we were struggling with, I guess, fax machines and party lines on our phones. And maybe the newest invention was an intercom in our house. So we would have laid this all out beforehand, but now we don't have that luxury. And so, you know, I think these are great questions. I look forward to hearing the applicant tell us how it's going to improve the coverage and whether he looked at co-locating on TVA or MLG&W structures. But I will remind this commission that we had a few residents that could not believe what I was hearing, you know, said that co-locating in one of those towers near Neshoba was going to be detrimental and ugly to the neighborhood, which, you know, that's the perfect storm, as you want to put it, in and co-locate in a massive structure, opposed to putting it in a structure that's dedicated. So those are my thoughts, and I look forward to asking questions tonight about coverage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Commissioners, other comments, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is George.
George?
My screen will not show me the coverage map in enough color differentiation to be able to distinguish. However, I think it's probably a fair assumption that the Campbell Clinic would be impacted by this new cell tower. So therefore, I think it's prudent for me to recuse myself from this topic.
Bob, do you have a comment? Bob?
You're muted, Bob.
I'm having trouble unmuting. Yeah, finally I'm unmuted. I'm having trouble with the machine for some reason. No, if the commissioner feels that he needs to recuse himself, I think he needs to recuse himself. I'm not going to dissuade him from doing that.
Well, I think that I would be a direct beneficiary, if you will. Either I would, or our employees would, or our customers would. So given that we would have an impact one way, either positive or negative, I think it's best to do that.
The only comment I would make is that this is almost a citywide issue, even though it's kind of geographic to Wolf River and Germantown Road right now. We're all affected. We're all on mobile phones. And if you drive down either Germantown Road or Wolf River on a daily basis, does that mean you should recuse yourself because it affects you? And I guess, Bob, I'm looking for some clarification. I understand where George is coming from because it's his business versus his residence, but I think we're all affected in that regard.
I think Bob fell off the meeting.
Yes, I was getting ready to say he was having some issues and it looked like he may have left the meeting to try to fix that and then come back.
Okay, well, when he comes back, why don't we revisit that? Because I think we're all affected by cell phone coverage.
Mr. Chairman, this is Keith Saunders, and I understand what was said there, but I tend to agree that this is not something that it's a personal gain or a company gain in regard to Campbell Clinic. I think this is something that is out there for each and every one to use if they have a cell phone, and they have to have this type of antenna system to be able to use the cell phone. So it's for public use and not private use. If Camel Clinic was putting this here to enhance their business or something of that nature, I would tend to agree with but I truly think I go by there 3 to 4 times a day going through the intersection. I assure you that I'm using my cell phone when I go through there.
Bob, I'm glad to see your. Can you hear us, Bob?
I can. Can you hear me? I got dropped right in the middle of my last statement. I don't know what happened.
Well, we were just commenting that, George has requested the recusal for himself, and you had indicated that if he wanted to, that'd be fine. And I brought up the point that we're all affected by the towers and the coverage that we get, and anybody driving up and down Germantown Road or Wolf River Parkway could be affected. And so should George recuse himself, or is he like the rest of us who are affected one way or the other by cell phone tower coverage?
Well, let's ask George. George, do you find that that's the situation that you have is any different from the rest of the commissioners, or is there something more particular about your situation that really gives you pause?
Yeah, I mean, I do see it different in large part because we have struggled with cell service within our new building and have been, as a result, have had to make some significant investment in some alternatives. And so this will, if this cell tower is approved, it will likely resolve the problem to a significant degree, eliminate the need for us to have alternate technology. And I think secondarily, to the flip side is that, I hate to say not my backyard, but the visibility of the tower from one of those visualizations was from the front drive of Campbell Clinic. And, it is certainly not an attractive tower like most of them are not.
Well, if you feel strongly, George, then I think by all means feel free to recuse yourself. And we also have Mr. Marsh, who's also going to recuse himself.
Okay, that's correct. That's the business relationship with Tower Ventures is the reason for that.
Okay, well, if both of y'all will stay on for the first item on the agenda, and then when we start into the second one, if you'll just make the request, that'll be fine.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, other questions regarding the tower?
Mr. Chairman, look, really just a comment. First of all, I applaud both commissioners willing or stating that they need to recuse themselves. And I do respect that. More importantly, I just want to thank George because I actually liked hearing that you need improved coverage in your clinic. A lot of that I've been hearing, not at your specific location, but throughout the healthcare corridor on Wolf River, that need. And so to hear you say it helped verify a lot for me. So thank you on that part.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mrs. Hicks.
I appreciate hearing Mr. Hernandez's perspective too. And I certainly want him to have coverage in that medical building. I had not heard that before, that there was any kind of a need, and we need cell coverage. But if this, I would consider this as a plan B or plan C if I knew that the applicant had looked at other alternatives. If they were turned down for, I guess this is directed at Sarah, if this were turned down tonight, could they come back?
Sarah is muted.
Sorry, my cursor was going nuts on me. I'm going to defer to Sheila and Cameron on this because it's a procedural question.
They could apply for a different location as a cell tower site. They could not come back to this specific location with an application for, I think, 6 months. So they would have to wait to do that. But they could look at an alternative location and they could immediately bring an application in for that location.
Sheila, and to clarify, could they bring it to a different location on the Office Depot property?
I'm not sure about that. I would defer that to our attorney as far as location is concerned, because it does say you cannot bring back the same application, which means the same site. And if it's on the same property, but a different portion of the property, I'm not sure about that. Mr. McLean, would you like to speak to that?
Well, if it's, I mean, is the footprint going to be the same essentially? Is it going to be the same? It's the same parcel?
Yes, that's what Sarah's asking. Could they come back with it on a different portion of Lot 2, on a different section of Lot 2?
Well, if it's the same, you know, footprint, everything is the same. They're just going to move the location around. Talking about, is that what we're?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, I don't see why they couldn't do that. They'd have to, you know, come back next month or whatever, but, you know, modify it to that extent.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, by the way, when we were, Mr. Chairman, I was dropped again in the middle of George's explanation. I didn't hear the end of it, but it sounded like he was going to a place where he had more invested in the transaction than the rest of you. Now that was just the impression I got.
And I think that's true.
Mr. Chairman, I had one other question for either Sarah or Sheila. Has the Neshoba Tower gone live?
It has not. They have gone through the construction plan review process and had the development contract and the final plan approved. Mr. Gwaltney, do you know if Tony Ladd has had a pre-construction meeting with them yet? I know the construction plans have been cleared. Do you know if they've actually gone and gotten their building permit yet?
They have had the pre-construction meeting, and typically they leave that meeting and go get the building permit. I would assume that they have.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, is there one thing you might be able to do for me? Is there any way you could get that map that shows the Neshoba Tower somehow or another side by side with the one that shows the tower here at that we're asking for?
Okay. I can, after I'm done presenting, I can leave the presentation and put them on the same slide.
I just like to see,
yeah,
you know, how those, if you put one in operations, how would this one really be that much greater?
Okay. I can do that if I just leave and you give me 5 minutes, I can do that.
I can give you all the time in the world.
Okay. If there are no other questions for me specifically, then I can stop presenting and I'll do that and bring it back.
Commissioners, other questions for Sarah or the staff? If not, we're going to take probably a 10-minute recess. Sarah, you can do what you need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Also, a comment. Remember that you have to give a reason for your vote. So when you make when you're polled and make a decision, please give a reason. Cameron, any other things I need to cover?
No, sir. Just a reminder to make sure to give me beginning of the meeting to read through the electronic meeting disclaimer.
I will certainly do that.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And go over a couple of those ground rules. I think we've got all the applicants within this meeting right now. But similar to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, staff is going to stay muted on video as well as muted on our audio unless we are presenting or being directly asked questions. So bear with us as we unmute ourselves, and Ms. Gibson will do the same unless she's calling roll for a particular item. Jody and Tim will also do the same thing. And then applicants, don't shake your head at me.
I feel like this policy is for me. I'm sorry. I feel singled out.
The entertainment factor comes at other meetings.
Cameron,
Yes, Sheila.
you may want to inform the board that Ms. Rush has retired and that we have a new secretary for the board. And welcome her aboard.
Thank you. Ms. Rush did retire on August 31st. So Regina Gibson will be in the driver's seat with us as we start to figure out how to handle these meetings. And so welcome her aboard for this meeting. And we will continue to work with her in the short run. And as staff figures out if we want to do it or if we want to keep Regina coming to this party too.
Good, good. If there's
Tonight she's here and she'll do some great minutes for you.
any other comments, commissioners? If not,
Just Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna have to jump off the live call, and I've got to take a kid to softball practice, so I'm gonna be on my phone calling in at 6 o'clock.
that's great, Forrest. Thank you very much. We're going to
Thank
take a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back on, or we'll stay on, mute yourself, and we'll be back on at 6 o'clock.
Chairman, I have the slide almost ready. So if those of you that want to see the other slide want to stay on, I can bring that for you in just one moment.
That'd be great, Sarah. Thank you.
And it
Just give me
also
another
looks like,
1 or 2 more minutes.
looks like Bob is on the phone as well as on video, so he's got a backup plan just in case.
Good.
Thank you, Bob. You're muted on both of them. On the phone, you'll have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Let's see, I'm still seeing you muted on both the phone and on your video.
Was that me you were asking for?
No, for Bob McLean, but thank you, Mr. Sawtell. We can see you and hear you. So on your number, Bob, you're 73, right? Last 2 digits of your phone number. So try hitting *6 on your keypad. There you go. So that you limit the feedback, hit the mute button on your phone. That way you're staying live, but we won't mute you.
Okay.
Cameron, I think he needs to turn the volume down on his computer also. That's what the feedback is.
So Bob, hit the mute button on your phone. There you go. Try muting your video, so hit the little camera button. That may lower the bandwidth that you're carrying.
Okay. All right, I'm going to bring up that slide in the meantime, so just one moment, please. So the top row is Office Depot. To the left is the pre-Office Depot tower, and the right is Post. The bottom row is the Neshoba. Left is pre, right is Post.
Sarah, that's great.
Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yes,
So I
you're
guess that
welcome.
means that all of you are seeing more than one color on the top two slides.
Yes.
Okay. My graphics must not be working. I can see them clearly on the bottom two slides, but it's all yellow on the top. But my technical issue.
Sheila may be presenting this item during the regular meeting, as I have to quickly go off for a little bit for another meeting. So if this item comes up and I'm not back yet, she will be there to guide you through this item.
Sarah, thanks for putting this together.
You're welcome.
Okay, Cameron, now I'm tied in so that the only thing that I get is through my phone. So I shouldn't be getting the feedback from the computer.
Chairman Harless, we're down to 1 minute.
Welcome, Regina.
Hi, how are you?
Oops, wrong button. Good, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. Glad to be here.
So Regina, I put up with you for 15 years on DRC. How many more I had to put up with you on the planning commission?
I don't know, how long are you planning on staying on the planning commission?
Not very long.
There's your answer.
Good to have you. Thanks.
Thank you. Chairman, you're muted.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Germantown Planning Commission meeting for the month of September 2020. I'm calling the meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda, Mr. Ross, if you would please read your statement regarding electronic coverage.
Thank you, Chairman Harless. Regarding electronic meetings, all local governing bodies in the state of Tennessee have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and Germantown is no exception. In order to carry out our government and operational responsibilities lawfully and effectively, while also considering the protection of public health, safety, and welfare, the Germantown City Administration has taken steps to conduct the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting and other public meetings, such as this Planning Commission meeting, electronically. These actions were taken in response to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order number 51 that extended Executive Order 16, and that has now been extended by Executive Order number 60. That suspended the requirements of the Tennessee Open Meetings Act to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies subject to the act to meet and conduct essential business by electronic means. The Germantown Board of Mayor and Aldermen, along with city administration, has determined that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Further notice of such electronic meetings has been and will continue to be published in the same manner as is currently used for regular meetings. The public is also and will continue to be able to view the agenda and have live access to the actual meetings by electronic means by logging into the city's webpage and clicking on the appropriate link. Video recordings of these meetings will also be made available as soon as practicable after each meeting on the city's website at www.germantown-tn.gov. These measures are temporary and are due to expire at the end of the Governor's Executive Order 60 on October 28th, 2020, unless further action is taken by Governor Lee. The public is also allowed to make comments to these public meetings through the email addresses that are provided as part of the city's website to make sure that proper comments are made as part of these public hearings. Thank you, Chairman Harless.
Mr. Ross, thank you very much. Now, if staff will please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Here.
Ms. Hicks?
Here.
Mr. Marsh?
I'm here.
Mr. Saunders?
I'm here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Hernandez?
Here.
Alderman Owens? I see you, but I didn't hear you. I'm gonna say you're here. Chairman Harless,
Here.
Mayor Palazola.
Here.
And we have a quorum for tonight's meeting. In fact, we have a full roll. I appreciate everyone being available for tonight's meeting. The first item we have is case number 20-007, which, I'm sorry, let me get the approval of the minutes. I'm jumping ahead.
Thank you.
So, do we have any deletions, modifications, additions to the meeting from last month? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Bacon and a second from Mayor Palazola. Please call the roll.
Alderman Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez,
Abstain, I was absent from the meeting.
Ms. Hicks,
Yes.
Mr. Marsh,
I'll abstain. I was absent as well.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders,
Yes.
Chairman Harless,
Yes.
Mayor Palazola.
Yes.
And the meetings from last month's the minutes from last month's meeting are approved. Now,
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't asked for my vote, and I vote yes. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Bacon.
No problem.
thank you, Commissioner Bacon. Now we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is case number 20-007, which is a rezoning. And do we have a presentation from staff?
Yes, sir. I am presenting now.
Thank you, Mrs. Pounders.
Let me know if everyone can see this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. The application before you is a rezoning application. It is for 7271 Neshoba Road. The applicant request is approval of a rezoning from the R low density single family residential to the R1 medium density single family residential. This is the zoning map for the area. This property is a 7-acre property that is located on the south side of Neshoba Road. The applicant is asking to have the zoning, the R1 zoning, which is very similar to what is to the south of the property. As you can see by the zoning map, the R single family is located to the north of the site and to both the east and the west. However, the southwest of the site, or the south side of the site, is R1. As I move forward on this application, this property was actually part of Shelby County, and it was annexed into the city of Germantown in 1964. At that time, the property was zoned R. Therefore, when it was annexed, it was not rezoned. The R zoning was retained on the property, and the current zoning dates back to that time period. It is Lot 2 within the Flynn subdivision that was actually approved by both the Shelby County Planning Commission and the Shelby County Board of Commissioners in 1960. The applicant is asking for the rezoning with the intent to redevelop the property for single-family residential on this site. As part of the rezoning request, a concept plan is required to provide information and show that based on the requirements for that zoning district, the bulk requirements of setbacks, lot size, lot width, and on this property, that the property could redevelop with those requirements being met by the site plan. There are several bases in which a rezoning should be considered. The state of Tennessee has indicated that they've established the criteria for when a rezoning should be considered by the board. There are 4 criteria. 1, change in the population. B, change in existing road patterns or traffic. The need for rezoning based upon change in what is classified as the neighborhood, and the effect of the request zoning on adjacent or nearby properties. These are the items that you will consider in determining the zoning of this property. Although we do ask for a site plan, please keep in mind that the site plan is only for informational purposes to determine that a piece of property is large enough to accommodate the lots that would be created under that zoning designation. This plan is compatible with some relevant planning documents. The first one being the Germantown Forward 2030 plan. It fulfills the Germantown objective of land use and transportation. Strategic objective number 1, the city experiences positive trends and assessed values of residential areas. And it's also compatible with the Germantown land use plan. However, that plan was adopted in 1978, and it recommends that the subject property be medium density residential at that time. It specifically states medium density growth as the major form of growth in the city should continue to occupy select areas as demand for more housing occurs. Based on these criteria, staff is recommending approval of this rezoning application. If this application is approved by the Planning Commission tonight, it would move forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for 3 readings. If approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, then a development site plan would be required to be submitted to this office, which would come before the Planning Commission, and if applicable, to the Design Review Commission. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Commissioners, do we have questions of staff? If there are no questions, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Sir? Hang on. Until I turn the light on. All right, go ahead. Yes, sir. This is Robert Estes with Parker Estes and Associates.
If you would give us your address.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
3460 Ridge Parkway.
Thank you. Please go ahead with your presentation.
As Sheila said, we are asking for a rezoning. The property is in an area that has been quickly redeveloping or has redeveloped over several years now. And basically we're asking for the same type zoning as the surrounding subdivisions to the west and to the south, and then to the east also, where those subdivisions have been developed under the R1 zoning. And we're basically asking for the same scenario.
Is that your presentation?
Pretty much, sir.
And the property in question, how many lots would you anticipate having?
We're looking at 7 lots.
I noticed there's some vacant property to the east. Are you considering either purchasing or going in with the owner in enlarging the subdivision?
There is another developer looking at developing that piece of property, and our developer and that developer have been communicating back and forth about possibly joining these 2 properties together.
Very good.
The concept plan that's in the package is a little different from what I gave to Sheila, in that the road is still on the same side. There's a 30-foot common open space between the rear property lines of those lots and the road, which will act as a landscape screen and fencing and so forth. If we develop it with this type of sketch plan, it could always flop and the road be on the other side. But at this point in time, we're asking for rezoning.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, do we have question of the applicant?
Chairman Harlan, this is David Clark. It's my understanding.
Any
we're
other
only voting
questions?
For the rezoning property.
Commissioner Clark, go ahead with your question.
I was saying, yeah, can you hear me?
Very good.
Yes, it's my
Yes.
understanding we're only voting for the rezoning of the current property, not the property to the east, correct? Okay, that was one of
That's
the
correct.
questions in the
Correct.
residents' letters of opposition, that they thought that both properties were being rezoned. We're just looking at the one that's in question tonight.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
To build upon what Mr. Clark just said, we did receive one letter of opposition, one letter of support. However, we did receive 12 emails and calls of inquiry on this application.
And Ms. Pounders, what were the inquiries about in general?
The general nature of the inquiries was what was the application for that was going to be before you today? What were you actually voting on? When we explained that this is a rezoning and that the zoning would be the same as the R1 to the south of the site, most of the residents were satisfied with that explanation.
Very good. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? If there's no questions, thank you for the presentation. Do I have a motion for this item?
Mr. Chairman, the Zoning and Annexation Subcommittee met on December 19th, 2019, and did not make a decision. Tonight's proposed motion is, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Tonight's proposed motion is approval to rezone a 7.49 acre parcel, 7271 Neshoba Road, located on the south side of Neshoba Road, approximately 355 feet west of Tamarack Lane, from R low density single family residential, subject to the comments and conditions listed above and in the staff report and the plans and documents submitted with the application.
Thank you, Commissioner Bacon. Do we have a second?
Second it. Saunders.
Commissioner Saunders, second the motion. Thank you very much. We open the floor for discussion. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Commissioners, do we have discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Saunders, I truly believe the property is in an area which does meet the criteria of rezoning to the medium density. The only thing I have reservations criteria which we like to have, and really need to see the concept plan or the plan that comes back before us, hopefully to the east instead of to the west of the property. But I really truly believe that the area warrants the R1 zoning.
Thank you, Commissioner Saunders. Other comments? If there's no other comments from the commissioners, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, Bob McLean, I'd
Yeah.
like to remind the commissioners that when they vote, They need to give a reason for their vote. That's for the record.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Hicks?
This is good zoning, so I do support the rezoning. It makes it consistent with the property to the south and to the west. But I do want to echo Commissioner Saunders' concerns with the site plan that I know is not what we're talking about tonight, but I would like to see it flipped. But it is good zoning, and I vote yes.
Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chairman, I'm voting no. This is primarily a request to rezone from low density to medium density. I realize we're not voting on the plan tonight, but I think the plan is a pretty good indication that this level of density is not going to fit on that piece of property, unfortunately. It's a long, skinny piece of property. I think if the applicant were able to team in some way with the owner to the east and have a larger development, I think the density would work. But I think in this instance, having a roadway in an existing homeowner's backyard is not justify the rezoning.
Mr. Saunders?
I'm gonna vote yes based on the rezoning request. However, I must echo what Mr. Bacon said in regard to the way it's laid out. I would have much, I guess I just would not be able to vote yes for something of that nature if it came back before us, but the zoning, I think, meets the criteria. I'm voting yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I'll too be voting yes for this rezoning, just the surrounding area zoned R1, and to keep the existing character of the other properties is reason for my vote. I think it's been clearly stated by my fellow commissioners that we don't see the current layout as the way we would vote for it in the future if we were approving a site plan tonight. As far as the rezoning goes, I'm voting yes.
Alderman Owens?
I vote yes for the rezoning based on the fact that there have been some changes in the neighborhood and the surrounding zoning warrants justifies this change. Like my fellow commissioners, I don't believe I could vote for the concept plan if it was to come before us, but I think the zoning is justified, and I strongly encourage some revision to that site plan or some type of combination of adjoining properties that would allow for a different plan to be submitted when the time is right.
Okay. Chairman Harless?
I also vote yes, basically for the same reasons that my fellow commissioners have indicated. The surrounding area is R1, and this will meet that. But I have the same reservations regarding the layout of the plan, and I would hope the applicant hears the comments made by the commissioners.
Mayor Palazzolo?
I'll be voting yes, primarily due to the city's most recent land use plan is in complete congruence with this request. Since the property is being asked to be rezoned residential medium density. Also, two existing relatively new subdivisions to the east match this pattern as well. And I would agree with my fellow commissioners that this lot lends itself to having a real challenge into coming up with something that fits. So I challenge you to make it work. Thank you.
To the applicant, I'm going to say thank you, and you've got some work ahead of you. Moving on to our next item. This is item number 2, which is 20-007 regarding a cell phone tower at River Village subdivision.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, Commissioner Hernandez.
I'd like to recuse myself from this topic and cancel it from the meeting.
Yes, sir, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Richard Marsh. Likewise, I would like to recuse myself on this request, and we'll exit the meeting.
Commissioner Marsh, thank you very much. We appreciate you being online with us, and you can step down. So does staff have a presentation for us?
Sheila, you're on mute.
Thank you. Before you is Lot 2 of the River Village subdivision, Section C. The request is for a new cell tower on Lot 2. The address for this property is 1275 South Germantown Road, which is the office depot that is located on that property. The current zoning is C2 for this site, which is general commercial. And I'm going to see if I can, there we go. The property is 3.8 acres in size, and the request is for a revised preliminary final site plan. The request is for the new cell tower is 140 feet in height. This application is requesting a revised preliminary and final site plan. This is a piece of property that was approved in 1999 with a site plan that encompassed Lot 2 and Lot 4 of the River Village subdivision. On this property is the retail building for Office Depot, which is 25,000 square feet. And then a second retail building, which is a medical office building, Memphis Pediatrics, which is 9,000 square feet. It is on Lot 4. The total parking for this site was 170 parking spaces that was provided for both lots. 125 parking spaces for Lot 2, which is Office Depot, and 45 parking spaces for the medical office. On July 14th, 2020, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a variance that reduced the parking by 7 lots on this property, resulting in 118 parking spaces for Lot 2. The current proposal is governed by Section 2386H and I of the zoning code, which deals specifically with the requirements for wireless transmission facilities in commercial districts. There are several criteria in which to review this type of request. The first one being that the tower must be set back. And I'm going to bring up the site plan so you can see this. This is an area of the property, and then this is the currently approved site plan for the property. As you can see, the parking, and this is the Office Depot, and then this is the building 2. Here in this area is the approved site where the parking variance was granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Here is a little bit larger layout of that area. According to the zoning ordinance, the requirements to review this includes the tower must be set back from the property line a minimum distance of the tower height plus 10 feet. All associated buildings and structures must meet the minimum setback distances of the zoning district. The applicant engineer must provide documentation that the wireless transmission facility meets or exceeds the ANSI standards for radio transmission emission. The maximum height of the tower is 140 feet, which includes any apparatus on the top of the tower, which would be a lightning rod. And then the tower must be designed for shared use. Development standards, including but not limited to a minimum buffer of 50 feet, consisting of landscaping and screening, should be on the outer perimeter of the property. This request complies with items number 3, 4, and 5 of the requirements of the ordinance. However, pertaining to 1 and 2, this proposal does not meet those requirements. I'm going to go to the landscape portion because the 2 slides that deal particularly with items number 1 and 2, in which this application fails to meet, has to deal specifically with the landscaping. Number 1 of that requirement deals with the setback distances for this property. The Office Depot building is approximately 40 feet from the proposed cell tower. And then the Walgreens building is approximately 50 feet from the cell tower. The tower, the tower height plus the 10 feet of the property would require that the cell tower be set back approximately about 50 feet. The developer has submitted a technical letter that assures that the cell tower fall zone would be 30 feet. The submission of that letter does comply with the technical requirement as far as the assurance that the fall zone for the area is not within 10 feet of the building setback. The next item has to do with the buffer for this property. If I go back to show you this actual site, the lot itself, there is landscaping on this site along both Germantown Road and throughout the parking lot within the parking alley. However, item number 6, which deals specifically with the 50-foot landscape buffer and screening along the perimeter, there is a provision that specifically states in the ordinance that no internal roads or driveway, parking area, structures, or storage materials may be allowed within the buffer strip. Additionally, both the cell tower and the equipment enclosure will be visible from the major corridor, from Germantown Road, which is a major corridor and gateway into the city area. Exceptions to this landscape requirement is a provision that if the Design Review Commission determines that the existing landscape is adequate, they can grant an exception to as part of this application request. I will go back to under the compatibility of relevant planning documents on this application. It is compatible with Germantown Forward 2030. It is also under the Germantown zoning ordinance. It is compatible with the provision of multiple tenants on the initial installation. So they are asking for multiple tenants on this one tower. Also, the Germantown land use plan for this property actually designates this as residential low density. So it does not, the land use plan does not address wireless transmission facility on this property. I will go to the provision that talks about the enclosure for this tower. As you remember, you saw this application at the August 4th, 2020 meeting, and at that time you made a couple of recommendations to the applicant and asked that they consider bringing back to you this information. One had to do with the materials for the enclosures, in which you asked that they consider using materials that's consistent with the building, which would be a brick enclosure or brick columns and a wooden fence. The applicant is proposing the use of CMU materials for the enclosure, as you can see by the detail that is on the screen. The second requirement dealt with the review of alternative sites in the immediate area. One of those sites being the MLGW TVA easement and tower that's located to the northwest of the site. The applicant did resubmit information that shows the new block enclosure, but he did not submit information that included alternative sites for this site, as requested at last month's meeting. Mr. Chairman, I will go to also the coverage maps. This is the pre and the post coverage map for the Neshoba site that you recently approved. As you can see, this is the proposed site. And what? I'm sorry, we don't have all of the maps, but this is the coverage map that is proposed for this Office Depot site, and this is a post map. It shows the new green area where this tower would cover. So this would be the Neshoba coverage map, and then this would be the new map for the Office Depot, as you can see. The rest of the slides deal particularly with photo simulations that the applicant has submitted that shows the tower based on views along both Germantown Road and Wolf River. This first view is looking at the site from the south, from Office Depot and Labana parking lot. This next slide shows the view from the Office Depot driveway onto Germantown Road. And then this slide shows the intersection of Germantown Road and Wolf Trail Cove. As you can see, it says that the site is not visible in this slide. The next slide shows the view of the tower on Germantown Road from the Baba Lanier Bridge. And then this is a view from the intersection of Wolf River and Germantown Road from the Perkins driveway. And again, this is another view of the tower looking east along Wolf River. This is a view of the tower and also the tower enclosure. This is the courtyard. with the existing canopy. And then this is the east of the intersection of Wolf River and Germantown. This is the Taco Bell that is located in that area, and then the tower will be farther behind that. And then this is a view looking west from the east intersection of Wolf River and Germantown at the Exxon convenience store. And then this is looking east of the intersection of Wolf River and Wolf River Circle. And this view is looking north at the intersection of Brow Brook and Germantown Road. This is where the Retreat apartment is located on the east side of Germantown Road. Mr. Chairman, with that, staff would be happy to answer any questions. I will mention that we did not receive any letters on this application, either in support or in opposition to this application.
Mrs. Pounders, thanks for the complete presentation. Commissioners, do we have questions of staff? If there's no questions, would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Mike, you're on mute. If you can unmute yourself.
No, I'm not on mute.
Michael Fay, the applicant.
Wrong mic. Sheila, so to grab what's on my screen, I'll go to another screen.
Okay.
It says share.
I can stop sharing.
Okay.
And so that would, you should be able to bring up your screen.
Okay. All right.
And if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Michael Fay of the Prime Development Group, 7520 Capitol Drive, Germantown, Tennessee.
Thank you.
And so is everyone seeing what I'm seeing on the screen that shows the Nahopia Center?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, let me explain to you a few things that we've been working on this particular plan. The first is that when we were at the last meeting, the board was very specific and very clear that you had concerns about aesthetics and you had concerns about, hey, could we move over to the TVA site? The first thing we did is, and we'll go back to these photo simulations in a minute, one of the concerns that is just human nature is that photo simulation correct? What we did, ladies and gentlemen, is we floated a balloon at 140 feet. You'll see in the photo simulations a red dot on all these pictures. That is the balloon. But it also gave us a visual reception of where the tower was. Can you see it? And as we'll go through this, we'll go through the other images in a minute. But the first thing I want to bring to your attention is, Mr. Chairman, you were very specific. Could this go on the TVA tower site? So in working up to last week with Tim Beers in the city engineer's office, we went back and forth on various discussions, various things that had happened. We were searching for information that brought us back to the 2011 flood, because that's probably the worst that we've seen in this general area. So the first thing I'll call to your attention is if you look on this particular image, you'll see this yellow box. That is the TVA tower that we talked about last week or last month. The blue line here on this recorded plat shows you the floodway. Both of these towers are in the floodway. This same map goes on to show that the 100-year flood is at 262. So I'm going to blow that up a little bit closer for you to be able to see now. There's a tower in question. This line is the floodway. Beyond that is the canal. One of the questions you run into when you're dealing with these particular matters is, hey, you can probably put the cell tower out there. You can work around it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this area, and I'm going to blow this up a little bit, the TVA restrictions, which I've highlighted in here, are basically pretty specific. But the ones that I want to call to your attention is at the end of the first dot, which says no grading is permitted within 25 feet of any pole, tower, guy, or guy anchor. The second, which is even more important, is that the TVA ground clearance, that's from the wire down to the ground, shall not be violated. All sounds very simple, but when we go back to this slide, which it may be, I hope you can see the colors. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. The tower, we knew the base of the tower from the green line maps that the city engineer's office provided. The bottom of that tower is at 258. We found that in the prior documents, the flood elevation for this building and this particular development was 262. That puts the 100-year flood 4 feet above the existing base. Now we go beyond that and we talk about the specifics of the elevation of the 2011 flood, and that puts us somewhere between 263 and 264. That's 5 to 6 feet above the existing base. Now, ladies and gentlemen, certainly could you put a foundation in there and work around that? Yes, but the equipment would have to be far above that elevation. And in order, as any designer would tell you, if we wanted to put our equipment out there and we knew that the water got up to 5 to 6 feet, well, then the designer would request, hey, let's go to 7 to 8 feet. The equipment up to 7 to 8 feet is not allowed in that area. You can't put the towers outside. You can't put that enclosure in there. But I think this gives you a better idea of what would really happen. Here's a photograph of the 2011 flood, and there's that tower. We couldn't get a road to it. We couldn't move anything around it. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we started in this particular location, you asked us to look whether or not this tower was viable. And when we went back and looked at that, as I said earlier, first, it's in a floodway. Second, there's no way to get a road to it because TVA is obviously not going to allow us to put 8 foot of fill. And third, to put the equipment up on a stand would not be allowed in the floodway as well. So we attempted to resolve that issue. The second thing that we did was, ladies and gentlemen, we went back to our Verizon engineer after the last meeting. The maps that were produced by Verizon were very difficult for all of us to read. We also asked him to give us an explanation of what had been happening here. You've seen in your packet that he's improving the 911, various coverage. The area has had a lot of drop calls. When we look at this particular area, the development that's happened in this site, when we look to the west, we all know it's basically become a doctor's corridor. When you look on Germantown Parkway, the number of vehicles going up and down that road every day on average is 52,000. When we go on Wolf River Parkway, we're at 23,000. So we've got this enormous number of people who are coming through here. We also have this doctor's corridor here. One of the things that I saw earlier in some of the discussions was there is a discussion about the Neshoba Tower. When we asked Verizon to provide this map, we asked them to tell us, show us where your existing towers are and show us where you have coverage and identify the holes in this particular area. So we look at this particular map, and what isn't very evident when you first look at it in this particular map, but when you look at the lower one, you'll see down here on the bottom of the drawing, basically south of the tower is the area that is covered. Now we look over here and we see this particular tower over to the right. This is Cameron Brown. That is a Verizon used tower, but it is a stealth tower, which means inside the stealth tower, there are probably 3 antennas rather than our typical array where we have the number. But you can also see how limited that coverage is. It gives you very little coverage. So to answer the first question, this particular site comes in and it fills this area. We all know that when we're up in here, we're in the park, but it also fills the safety needs in this area for all of our folks that go to the doctors. My parents have had their doctors in that particular location. And then when they also look at this, the number of people who are pulling their phones out and needing to make a connection. I think one of the other board members that has recused himself also earlier said that in the brand new Campbell Clinic area, that building is experiencing serious connection issues. I can tell you other clients who are down the street here who are also experiencing issues with that particular coverage. So when we look at these particular maps, I ask you to keep one thing in mind. These maps were created with one thing in mind: what happens with this coverage? I cannot explain what happened with this coverage. My belief is that when we look at the Neshoba, when it comes online, it will fill this void. So when we go past this particular issues with the TVA site, let's come back to the other issue. Ask us as well, to show you pictures of what a lightning rod looks like. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a picture of a lightning rod. Not very big, but that gives you an idea of what it looks like. So if you'd allow me to go back to the pictures that you looked through a few minutes ago, they were put together in a specific order so it would be logical for you to be able to follow where we're going. The first issue is that one of the commissioners last month said, hey, I don't want you to come out and see what it looks like from that canopy. This is superimposed to show you generally what the enclosure would look. And just beyond the trees, you can see there would be the tower. We go out from under the canopy, it becomes a little more evident. Yes, you would see the tower. Well, we also decided that we would give you 4 directions to look from. This first direction, we are starting on the west side of the intersection, and we are looking back towards the site. You can see the tower through there, but I also called your attention, if you look on that particular image, you will see the red dot. The red dot is the 140 feet. That's how tall it physically would be. We go to the second image. Yes, we're right next door to the Exxon, and yes, it is evident. You can see it, but you're also called your attention that you're going to see all of these overhead lines and other clutter. Now, we're going to switch to the other side of Wolf River Boulevard. We're now looking east, back towards the intersection, and down in this corner, you will see the tower is evident, and very closely, you'll see a red dot. We move further up into the parking lot, once again, to give you a view. This is, once again, the red dot you see on top of the that we floated so that you could actually see the tower's top. So now we're going to come in the opposite direction. We're going to go north. We're down here near the village entrance. And one of the points that we tried to make at the last meeting was that due to the landscaping requirements that the city asked us to put in, all developments ask in, we have these tree covers that you see that have grown and grown well. That streetscape is creating buffer. When we were at this intersection, because we had a red-orange ball, you can't see it. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're now at Briarbrook, which is a lot closer than I think most of us would have thought in our mind's eye. The tree line still gives us coverage. We go off of Briarbrook and go into what was the old Neshoba, which is now the Trustmark Bank. In that parking lot, you still can't see that red ball. We go close to the intersection. We're almost at the Perkins Drive, and still the tree line gives you cover. We go all the way back there and pull into the Perkins Drive, and we see the tower. Once again, you see the red dot. The next images are the ones I thought were most paramount that this board asked us to take a look at. We had discussions about this being a gateway to the city. What's it going to look like when you drive into our city? So we started down at Walnut Bend. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're on the road. You do see the TVA towers, you see the lines, but you do not see the tower or the red dot. We pull over it across the street, the shopping center that's in front of Lowe's, and in that parking lot, you still cannot see the orange dot. We're starting on Bobby Lanier Bridge, and at this particular spot, the tree line that is in Shelby Farms gives us more coverage. When we're at midpoint in the bridge, you can see, once again, you'll see the orange dot, you see the tower, but it's also intersected by these overhead lines. We come up to the Las Tortugas, and in their parking lot, ladies and gentlemen, yes, you can see the tower, once again, in the orange dot. But when you go out on the street where the cars are, in front of that same shopping center, our treescape covers the trees. Now we're about to pull into the Wolf River, into the site. You see the pediatrics building, and there is a gap, obviously, in this area because there's no landscaping. We go to this last picture. This also shows you the image that we wanted to talk, the image that shows this is probably our worst case scenario. So when we're talking about this particular site and we're talking about why this particular location, did you study the TVA site? I hope that you do see that, yes, we did study the TVA site, and we ran into a number of issues that we could not get beyond. No matter what we want to do, ladies and gentlemen, I can't get past the fact that it's in a flood way. I can't get equipment in there. I can't put it up on a stand. I have also other issues of trying to get a roadway to it so that we could at least service it. So we did study that particular plan. We ask that you keep a couple of other things in mind in this particular application. As was stated by staff, there's been no opposition to it. We differ with staff that we believe that the DRC does in fact have in the conditions the ability to modify or grant us an alternative landscape plan along the frontage. And whether or not the board prefers that we have a split face block or a brick enclosure around that, we're amenable to whatever request. But ladies and gentlemen, we have gone through probably the biggest demand in our lifetimes for cellular coverage. We all now, in the last 6 months, have found out quite specifically what's going on with cell coverage. Do you have good coverage? It is an emergency and a safety issue. You know, we talked about it in the dogwood that there are people who said they had various medical devices that were hooked up to their cell phones. But what I think the biggest issue that we run into right now is that first, when we look at this particular location, we have a large group of people who may or may not be familiar with their doctor office. I know that I've had doctor offices, and when they've told me that I had to go on Wolf River Boulevard, I had to pull it up on my phone to make sure I was in the right parking lot. The second issue is that we now use our phones for almost everything. And unless we have this coverage, unless we have these locations, it's a demand that we are all forcing. As the mayor has said in some of the other conversations at the executive session, one of the things that's happening is, yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first anomaly that we've got that you've had to work in a commercial area. But ladies and gentlemen, we have no neighborhood opposition. We have no neighbors who have said we don't want it there. That's a big factor that we all were put through on some other sites. And you've been put through on the sites, the Neshoba site as well. In this particular site, I remind you, we have no objectors. I'd also remind you that as we move forward with this discussion on this plan, is that we've spent 2 years looking at this site. We've tried to figure out whether we could go in this side, that side. We discussed last month the potential of whether or not we could go on the north, and we showed you there are just too many easements for it to be viable. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, will it be visible? Yes. But when we start talking about our police and our fire safety and dealing with all of those issues that we see every day, this is a safety demand that has been professionally studied by Verizon, and Verizon has told us that this particular location is the best suited for meeting the area demands today and for tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Fahey. Appreciate your comments and presentation. Commissioners, do we have questions of the applicant?
I've got a question. It's David Clark. Mr. Fahey, did y'all happen to look at, you talked about a little bit about floodplain being back there. Did you look at any of it area to the north where there's some cell phone towers? It looks like just from an aerial photograph, search on maps here, that there's other towers and some of those pictures you showed over there, like in Shelby Farms, just north of the river. Were those sites explored at all?
They were. One of the issues that we ran into, earlier, I assume you're speaking in this general area up north?
Yes, that's correct.
Just
north of the river.
Yeah. What you're running into is the TVA lines go somewhat in an angle through here. The problem that we run into that I should have spoke up, but I think you're probably all very well aware of, is that with the TVA tower, we get one carrier. One carrier. That's it. We know that we've got Verizon and AT&T going after each other on a daily basis to try to get you to carry their cell service. But in this particular case, this tower will now be able to carry 4 carriers. And in the event that one of these carriers has a overwhelming demand, they can add more antennas in this and increase the arrays. They could have 2 sets of antennas to make matters even better. In areas such as where Campbell Clinic is, we don't know I don't know what their demands are, but one of the things that doesn't show up in these propagation maps is this is showing where they have driven around and have taken various readings, but it doesn't show demand. It doesn't show demand, and we've all been in buildings where we've had no coverage. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, Mr. Clark, but we did look at other sites.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions. Mr. Fay, and I presume you listened or watched the executive session. Obviously, the Neshoba Tower is not live. The Neshoba Tower will go online and go live theoretically, before this tower would be constructed to go live. And once the Neshoba Tower comes in, this map is a little misleading to me, because it doesn't reflect what the Neshoba Tower's coverage is going to be. And so my first question is in looking at the Neshoba coverage map, it really shows a yellow area well to the east of Germantown Road. And so my question is did you look at, and I know, over there, I mean, obviously there's the Campbell Clinic building. There's the Greenway that goes to Neshoba Park. But did you all look at any sites to the east of Germantown Road that would hide the tower back up kind of in there instead of right on Germantown Road?
Mr. Bacon, I think our belief was that being closer to the TVA towers and the TVA lines, being on that side of Germantown Road would be more, I don't know, aesthetically pleasing than being on the east side, where there really are no other, you've got trees, and trees maybe go to 80 to 100 feet, but on the east side, there really are no the tower would be just as tall on one side as it would be on the east. And to answer your question about the Neshoba map, all I can tell you, since I had nothing to do with that particular project, after our last meeting, we got with Verizon and had a little discussion that those maps were very difficult for all of us to read. No information, no road lines. We all had very difficult time trying to differentiate the different colors. And we asked them to go back and make maps of just this area. So I can't tell you why they didn't do one versus the other, but I can tell you that this particular set of maps were created for this site specifically.
But that's correct, but it just doesn't, from the standpoint of looking at coverage gaps, it's not a true representation of what will happen when the Neshoba Tower goes live, correct?
Well, I think that the map that you see today, the one I showed before you right now, where it shows the new side of Neshoba, I believe that almost everything that you see in that quadrant down there will become green.
The second question, and maybe I thought we were talking about, when you talk about co-location, that doesn't mean building, that doesn't mean installing cell antenna on that tower, does it? It just means building a tower inside of a tower. Is that correct?
No, co-location would be where you had a tower that had AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, all of those. The tower was designed to carry all of those carriers. Whereas on the TVA towers, only one carrier can go on there. That's it.
But I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. So if you're co-locating on a TVA tower, that's not multiple cell carriers. That's only and that antenna array for that carrier, though, is attached to that existing tower, correct?
No, sir. It's an independent structure that actually has to go up through the erector set. But I think it's very clear that TVA, MLG&W, who have these towers, are very specific. One carrier is the only one that can go in that particular, which takes us back to the similar situation that we had over at Cameron Brown Park. Because of that that limited height, you get the limited coverage. And that is, that is one of the benefits of having the taller requirements now, so that we can limit proliferation.
But even as you described, and this is the last comment, even as you described, if you being in the floodway, you would still, if you tried to reach an agreement with TVA or whatever you would do from the standpoint of that existing tower, you still have equipment that you've got to locate at the base of that antenna array, and you typically can't do that remotely, can you? I mean, it needs to be in pretty close proximity to that antenna.
It has to be right at
the antenna, and so in this instance, it'd be in the floodway. That's not the flood zone. That's the floodway.
That's correct. It would be in the floodway. Yeah, and that was what we were surprised when we found those maps and talking with the city engineer. And one of the reasons why we didn't turn the data in, I wanted to make sure that what we presented to you was correct. I had crossed the difference between the floodway and the floodplain at the BZA, and I did not want to make that mistake twice.
That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Bacon. Other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Mike Palazzolo. Just had a couple of questions for the applicant. First of all, I'd just like to thank the applicant for addressing, I guess, what was my primary concerns, which is really a design review commission matter, but the enclosure, the materials and such, and of course, we'll rely on the DRC's judgment on how that moves forward. But I do appreciate the attention to that small detail before you even get to that stage. The other thing, so do you have right now do you have a lease in hand for this particular, or an agreement in principle with the carrier for this particular application, or for all four carriers?
Mayor Palazzolo, at this time, Verizon is out extremely anxious to get this tower up, and that is the only one that I know at this moment that is signed or is ready to go.
Yeah, but you can handle multiple carriers on this particular site, correct?
This tower design will carry up to 4 carriers. That's correct.
And that's right now, isn't that all that exists, or I guess major national ones, or are there more or less?
Well, you do have a few smaller ones, but yeah, they're, and who knows what will happen in the next few years with cellular business. I mean, right now there are still 4 majors.
Yeah, another comment, and I'm very appreciative that you looked at the other site that the chairman pointed you toward. I guess in the best case scenario, if that was not in a floodway and you're able to locate equipment, and then also if you're able to handle multiple carriers opposed to the limit of just one, that would have been a viable solution, but apparently it's not a viable solution. I would just piggyback on what Vice Chairman Bacon had mentioned. So the other, if you looked at sites east of the intersection of Germantown and Wolf River, I guess you'd have much more exposure to various neighborhoods and businesses where we know that there would be significant opposition to putting something in a backyard, or literally not in my backyard mentality. So were there any locations over there that even met, gave you any thought to look at more deeply or more closely?
Well, Mayor, as I said to Commissioner Bacon, our belief was that the existing TVA lines created a kind of a visual, the site plan had already been broken up. If we go to the east side, we're obviously near the Chick-fil-A and move in that direction, but there's also a brand new apartment facility that's about to come online. And this particular site, which, as the BZA said, this is a very unique piece of property. It's the Office Depot property is rather unusual with its 2 right-ins and right-outs. It has very limited access, so it has an abundance of asphalt. So in our belief, we felt that this particular site, by just literally carving a hole in the asphalt, putting gravel in place and putting the tower in place, was a much more logical situation than going on the east side, where we had nothing around us other than trees and neighborhoods.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have for the applicant this time.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, other questions? Mr. Fay, I have a couple of comments. If I could go back to your first slide that shows the TVA tower and the floodway. And can you go to my left, which would show the next tower?
This one? This tower?
So is it in the floodplain? Is it in the floodway?
Yes, sir. Both of these towers are in the floodway. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And if we went further left, is there another one?
There is another tower that is a TVA transmission tower. Yes, sir. It is not in the floodway, but it is, we did not research that one, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't consider that one? Well, wait a minute, before you answer that question. I believe we need cell phone coverage in the area, okay? So I'm wanting to get there, okay? I would just like to find a way that we can do it where it's not, I've got a couple of issues with the location where you are. So I'm saying, can we go to this tower that's outside the floodway? Is that a possibility? And if you haven't researched it, I'll just throw it out there to you, okay? Secondly, what happens, and this may be heresy, but if you went back across the river and behind Lowe's, I realize that's not in Germantown, but there's no, I don't think there's any residential back there. That's all woods. Is there a possibility of putting it back there?
Well, let me answer your first question, Mr. Chairman. By going to the third TVA tower, it's pretty rough land over there. I'm not sure how you could even get to it so far as access. I can't tell you, we did research that the towers that are in place were originally constructed somewhere around 1962, because we could see them on a old aerial image. But the city of Germantown didn't start studying have flood maps until the 70s. And whether or not, I don't know what the relationship with that site would be in relation to the floodway or the flood elevation, but I think you could see it'd be awfully, awfully close. So no matter what we would do, if we were to be in that location, I think it would be safe to say we would probably have to fill, which would go back to those original TVA discussions, and doing that work under the lines is just frowned upon. And as you saw in the regulations, it's not something that's up for discussion. You will not fill under those lines. You will not make those lines closer to the road or to your surface. So I don't think that particular site is viable. The answer to your second question is, if we go to the opposite side, go somewhere near Lowe's, we actually move our coverage away from our primary area. And our primary area that we're trying to feed, as you see in the coverage maps, is actually south of the intersection. That's where those maps show that the major coverage is happening. So as we shift it, we will lose coverage significantly.
Well, we're talking about maybe a quarter of a mile, and that has that big of an effect?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me go to the maps that we had, and I think this gives you an idea of the towers that are out there in place today. So if you were to move the tower over in this direction, I think you can see what happens. It's, if you look beyond what's happening with the green and the yellow and take a look at the red dots, there's a pattern there. These cell towers triangulate in between each other so that they can carry the load. Moving it away from that area, we could very significantly lose our effectiveness.
Well, I understand you're the expert, and I certainly don't mean to be. I'm just trying to find a way that would be a solution for everyone concerned. Because while I believe in cell towers, and I believe we all need them, and for the medical reasons and safety reasons and everything that's been discussed, I'm not sure the location that we have with the Home Depot or the Office Depot is the correct location. And one of the concerns I have, and it wasn't a concern until last weekend when the hurricane hit Lake Charles, is there was a cell tower on top of the TV station in Lake Charles, and it collapsed and went into the TV station. And had they not had vacated the premises, some people would have been injured or even possibly killed. And so I have a concern that we're right there next to Walgreens, next to Office Depot, and next to a motel. So, and I realize it's supposed to collapse on itself, but the one in Lake Charles didn't. So anyway, I have that concern, and so I would really like to see another location.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could respond back to you, I saw the same image that you did of the tower that did fall on the TV station, and that particular tower was one of the old, I tend to call them erector sets. You know, they look much like a TVA tower. It was a triangular shaped design. The new designs that you see today are the monopole design, which is, it's not round. It's got points, and it is designed to carry even greater loads. And as you know, we had talked about before, when Tuscaloosa went through the tornado years ago, the only thing that was left standing was the cellular towers, but those were the newer designs, the monopole signs.
That's Mr. Faith, thank you. That's a good response, and I appreciate that. That gives me some feeling of relief concerning Lake Charles and the issue, so I appreciate that. That was the only questions I had. Commissioners, are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of questions. This is Forrest Owens.
Yes, sir.
There was some discussion, I think, previously about exceptions, landscaping exceptions, and could we have staff clarify what those issues are, and whether or not that they can be the DRC can grant that?
Yes, sir. The ordinance provides the requirement that there is a 50-foot buffer around the perimeter of the property. However, it does state that the DRC has the authority to grant an exception if they determine that the alternative landscaping that is presented meets the intent of the buffer. So yes, the DRC does have that authority to grant that exception if what is proposed by the applicant is acceptable to them.
All right, thank you, Sheila.
Sheila, what about the setback issue?
The setback issue is addressed by the letter that the applicant submitted, which actually indicates the fall zone for the tower. As long as the fall zone is within that 50 feet area, in this case, it's the height of the tower plus 10 feet, then the letter is sufficient. I think the letter specifically determines that the tower will collapse upon itself and have only a 30-foot fall zone. So it's within that 50 feet. So that is acceptable. And there is no exception required for that.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Saunders.
Mr. Saunders.
A couple of comments, and probably one of the more skeptical commissioners in regard to sight line coming into our gateway. I think Mr. Fay and his group has done a good job in somewhat easing that skepticism that I have in regard to seeing the tower. The only thing I keep thinking is that, you know, although you can't see it until you get right at it, it's still 140 feet in the air. And everything else around there is about 30. Also, the other thing is looking at your elevations, it shows 4 points. I think the one's at 104 feet, one at 116, 128, and the top one at 140. Those are all points of location where a array of antennas can be placed, correct? You muted yourself there, Mr. Fay.
Sorry, Ms. Sanders. Actually, those are the splice. It shows the locations of just how, when the tower is constructed, those are the splice points. You know, it's not one big tower, it's brought out in pieces.
I mean, only the arrays of tower antennas at the very top of the tower itself?
The arrays are generally in 15-foot segments. So they would start at the top and work their way down.
Okay, so you could have as many, if you had 3 spaces between there, you could be down at 100-foot level with plus or minus with another array of antennas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So instead of having just that one array at the very top, we'd have more antennas up there. And when you start talking about how many you're going to have, each one of them normally has one in each direction, or at least a quad direction, or not quad, but triangular direction. So if they go back to 2, then you could have as many as 6 to 8 antennas on a level. So in that range, I guess.
Yes, sir. You know, one of the things that's changing right now is with the 5G technology, the antennas. Well, as we all know, what we looked at 10 years ago doesn't look like anything that we see today. The antennas have gotten much smaller.
Yeah, we all got Dick Tracy watches on now called Apple watches, right? So, but I guess the thing is, I see also that this speaks to going from 3G to 4G. So this tower is really not being set up to handle 5G yet?
Yes, sir. It will carry the 5G, but in this particular location, he is stating that at this time, most of our customers are operating in 4G instead of 3G. One thing that is rather hard to believe, the iPhones that most of us carry, there's not a 5G iPhone for sale today. It doesn't exist.
I understand.
So that's what this was being set up so that it would be able to operate on the 4G instead of the 3G.
Okay. Mainly the LTE signal, I guess, out there. But once again, I want to commend you and your group on doing the study and put there. And I understand TVA. I've dealt with them in the past, and they're about as bad, if not worse, than the railroad when it comes to touching property that they have. So I can understand that you will not be able to do the things you think you can do. So thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Saunders, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had one follow-up, and I apologize. I should ask this of staff earlier. When TAC met and staff met to review this application, and I know that our IT director, Tony Fisher, is in Lake Charles right now. They're on their way back, and I'm hoping they'll get back safely with our members of Tennessee Task Force 1 that responded to Hurricane Laura. I asked staff, did our IT director get a chance to review this either the first time around or on this application? Was he able to make any comments on the application?
Yes, sir. He did review this. The comments are included in the staff report. They're actually on page 7 of the staff report.
Thank you. I wish he could be here this evening because as we rely on the applicant's expertise, we can also counterbalance his expertise with our resident expert. But thank you. I just want to make sure that he did review everything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, would you like for me to read his comments into the record?
Yeah, please, if they're not overly lengthy, please.
No, they're not. The first comment says the coverage data provided coincides with the independent data the city has collected. And then the second comment was coverage inside some nearby medical facilities is challenging and due to their construction. So basically, he coincided with what you had said earlier about the need for the medical facilities in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, other questions?
Mr. Chair, I just had two follow-up questions. Mr. Fay, I actually asked this question. I want to kind of piggyback on Commissioner Saunders' questions about 5G. And I'd ask you this, I remember asking you this question with the Dogwood application. I just can't remember the answer, but we were, whatever the term would be, we had to approve the 5G. It was the FCC law that we had to approve the location of 5G towers and whatever transmitters, you know, all throughout Germantown. With the merging, I know, I mean, right now there's really no 5G, not a lot of 5G phones or 5G service, but inevitably it's going to that. So what will happen to a 140-foot tower when the technology changes and it brings those transmission antennas down to light poles and all the things that are talked about with 5G? You're on mute, Mr. Fay.
It's a great question because it is very confusing. One of the things that, as you said, the federal government said that the 5G could go on telephone poles and in areas for lower cell. The problem that you run into with these, I think we all call them now small cells, is they have very limited range. Just as we found with our other towers that we've had in Germantown before, with the 100-foot tower, it's very limited. When we go up to 140, the range changes significantly. Now, when this tower goes in, we all know one thing, that these cellular companies are going to do everything in their power to get you the fastest service possible. The comparison to 3G and 4G to 5G is basically going back to a 286 computer and then going to a Pentium. There is really very little comparison. When we all see our download data, maybe 200 gigabytes per second, well, it goes up to 1,000. So it's my belief, first of all, that the carriers have positioned themselves that when, well, we know they position themselves. When Apple comes out with that 5G phone in this fall, the demand is going to go to have 5G. And just as we all did with our iPhone, when we used it and we were on 3G or we were on Roam or LTE, that phone is going to show you what you're getting. But to answer your bigger question is having the tower, and having the towers is going to limit the need for the small cells because the service will already be available. There won't be a need to put it there. But when you go in between areas that are between towers where we have lulls, we may have, you know, topographic issues. That's where I think you're going to see more of those. And you may see more of them in neighborhoods in the future. Who knows?
The second, thank you. The second question, did you guys look at Neshoba Park at all, which is relatively high? It's city property. There's a lot of woods back there. There's no NIMBYs. You know, it's obviously behind Baptist, but you could bury it in those woods back there by the Greenway.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the issue that we run into, no matter where we put towers, is that you're going to see them wherever I put it. We don't have any 140-foot trees. I can't tell you if that particular area was looked at. This particular site, we've looked all around the Office Depot property and the TVA towers because this is where our client has said this is where the demand is. We need to be in this area. So it was driven by that data.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Go ahead, Sherry.
Oh, thanks. Sorry. Mr. Chairman had a couple comments, and I appreciate the presentation. We do need cell coverage. We need cell coverage. We need cell coverage. And I want to commend Mr. Fay for the presentation because I have a whole list of reasons I was going to vote no, and he's addressed almost all of them. And alternatives, yes, you seem to have looked at all the alternatives. Is it going to be an eyesore? Probably. And is there a need? And from what our fellow commissioner said, and what our IT director said. There is more of a need than I understood in the past. So I appreciate the effort in floating the balloon and everything that the applicant has done to help us understand this.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. Other comments? Commissioner Clark?
Yes, I just had a question about the Neshoba Tower. I know Mr. Fay didn't have anything to do with that, but he may be able to answer it. We've talked about single carriers and multiple carriers on these towers. Is the Neshoba Tower a single carrier or a multiple carrier? One question I had. You're muted again, Mr. Fay.
Sorry. Turn myself off. My wife wants that. In this particular case, the TVA tower that it is in is a single carrier. As we said earlier, only one carrier is allowed in a TVA set.
Okay, and then my next follow-up, it's more of a comment than a question. I think everybody has expressed their opinions of the aesthetics of the tower, and I don't believe it's just the aesthetics at the 140-foot level. It's also the aesthetics at the base level, and it's just different to have a tower and have a base and a wall built in a parking lot versus, where we've seen them before in parks and in other areas as well. So I guess my question, like Commissioner Bacon said, Neshoba Park, or how I mentioned earlier, Shelby Farms Park over there north of the river, seem like two other options that could be possible and still get the same coverage, just from a layman's terms of looking at them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments? If not, we have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, the subdivision and site plan review subcommittee did not meet in August. Tonight's proposed motion is the approval of a revised preliminary and final site plan for a 140-foot tall wireless transmission facility cell tower on Lot 2 of River Village subdivision, Section C, 1275 South Germantown Road, subject to comments and conditions listed above and in the staff report and the plans and documents submitted with the application.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Bacon and a second from Mayor Palazzolo. Please call the roll. I'm sorry, let's open it for discussion. This was the commissioners only. So commissioners, any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, first of all, I'd like to thank the commission for a lot of thought, a lot of asking difficult questions. This application to me, with what has occurred during the first meeting we had, and then with the revisions and what I guess the conversation and the questions that occurred during executive session, this rivals the Dogwood School application. So I appreciate all the commissioners' concern, their questions, and also just being thoughtful on this particular application. With that said, I'm going to be voting for this evening. For me, it's pure and simple. It's public safety first. This was affirmed to me and reaffirmed when Commissioner Hernandez made the statement earlier, recusing himself, and then also making a statement that concurred with our IT director's need for better cell coverage in our Wolf River medical corridor. It's not only Campbell, it's West, it's Sutherland, it is Gastro 1. This isn't to me about just cell phone coverage. This is about data transmission and the ability for our emergency providers, our traditional healthcare, to be able to have that access. In today's world, when our ambulances are running, our EMS director is putting out the fleet, we can't drop calls. With more than 90% of the people making 911 calls on cell lines, to me, public safety is priority number one. Aesthetics take a back seat. I do appreciate the applicant showing 15 or so different exposures or street views on this particular tower. And no, it's not something that meets the fancy of the eye. However, I only really saw two very stark I guess, sight lines that made me see a tower. The rest were somewhat blended in, especially with all of the power lines in the TBA and the MLG and W structures. Also, I'm thankful for the applicant looking at other potential sites and exhausting that. When I look at the coverage chart that's been provided, you know, there's a cluster of non-service all up and down the Wolf River Boulevard medical corridor, and the improvement actually stretches south all the way to Farmington. So a lot of coverage in this area. You know, it's an elected person's dream when no one comes forward as a residential property owner, a commercial property owner, or a tenant to oppose this application. Keeping that in mind, I think we've done great due diligence looking at this particular application, and I hope my colleagues would consider an affirmative vote, mainly on public safety. You know, in the perfect world, I think I said in executive session, we would have laid all these out in the 60s or 70s, but no one could envision what would be needed in 2020. A city that's near build out does not have the luxury of cherry picking cell sites. We've seen that in the Dogwood application. We've seen that at the Madonna Learning Center, the tower that's on Poplar. That's no more stark than this particular location. This gets the job done for public safety. Mr. Chairman, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Other comments, commissioners?
Just one comment, Chairman. I've said what I thought about the project, but I did want to make one comment that carries forward should it pass to the DRC, and that is I support anything that they want to do to help hide this. So I hope they take all the leeway they need to help make at least the base or anything else somewhat hidden.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. Other comments? Let me make a comment here. I don't think there's anybody, Mr. Fay, on the commission that opposes additional cell towers. I think we're all for public safety. We all want more coverage. I think that's a given. I think the issue that we're facing is the location of the tower. We want it. And several of us think, well, maybe there's a better place for it. And that seems to be, in my mind, the big issue here. It's not whether, you know, where we fought Dogwood, it was, well, they didn't want the tower, period. This is a case where we want the tower and we want the coverage. It's just, is this the right location for it? And so I think you and your team have done an excellent job in trying to educate us on the issues and the concerns that you have. And so I want to thank you for those efforts. And those are the comments that I have. Commissioners, do you have other comments? If not, we'll call for the vote. Please call the roll.
Mr. Saunders?
I'm voting yes for several reasons. One, I agree with our mayor that there's definitely a need for cellular service for our first responders and the people that are trying to get them to respond. I also feel like that the applicant has made a gallant effort in showing me that although it's going to be 140 feet in the air, most people would probably never see it because of the landscaping, tree lines, and all around our streets that I think past commissions and DRCs have made a gallant effort in making sure that happens. I agree with also Mrs. Hicks that hopefully that the DRC will look at this and make sure that landscaping is an issue that's taken care of. So I'll be voting yes for this tower.
Okay, Mr. Clark?
I too will be voting yes for the tower. I echo my fellow commissioners. You know, I wish it could be put somewhere else where it's a little unsightly, but I understand that that's not the case. I think Mr. Fay has done a good job of explaining the pros and cons of putting it elsewhere, and I know that we need the coverage there, and so I'll be voting yes for this.
Ms. Hicks?
I'll be voting yes. I appreciate it is a safety concern, and we haven't had any neighbors object. Yes.
Alderman Owens?
I also appreciate Mr. Fay and his team for doing a great job. I have to tell you, I was skeptical. I have become convinced that you have studied the alternatives, and that really this is the best possible solution in terms of coverage, in terms of safety, in terms of providing that medical corridor with the cellular and data that they need. And so kudos for doing that legwork and presenting that to us. I vote yes.
Mr. Bacon?
I'm grudgingly going to vote yes. I agree with Mayor Palazzolo. I have been for multiple towers that have come before us, come before the commission over the years, pretty distinct proponent of, public safety and addressing the challenges that we have in Germantown with cell coverage. It's remarkable that we still have numerous areas in Germantown that don't have adequate coverage. The Dogwood School location was a significant challenge because it was right there next to homes and people's backyards. And, we approved that because there really wasn't any place else for the tower, for that particular tower and that particular location for it to go. I'm not completely convinced. I appreciate the presentation, Mr. Fay. I think you did an excellent job covering it. To Commissioner Owens, Alderman Owens' comments. Yes, I came in with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns that I believe you've addressed. I'm not totally convinced that, maybe there might have been another location east of Germantown Road, but unfortunately, I was just looking at Google Earth while you were presenting, and you pretty quickly get over into houses and apartments and residents' backyards. And so while it's not the best place to put the darn thing right there on Germantown Road, I think you're going to see it. I think it's going to be pretty ugly, but it's just something that we really need. And it's to Mayor Palazzolo's comments, to have it located in a commercial area and not in a neighborhood is certainly more palatable. So I'm going to vote yes.
Chairman Harless?
Well, I would like to first thank all the commissioners for their thoughtful responses and comments. I think it was a exercise that was worth it. I think Mr. Fay, I think you and your team did an excellent job, and quite frankly, you've heard that you swayed some of the commissioners in their decision. So, tip of the fedora for that. I think all of us are committed to improving cell phone coverage because we all want safety, security, and all the things that improved cell phone coverage gives us. So I'm much like some of my other commissioners are on the horns of a dilemma. I don't like the location. I really don't. But in the great scheme of things, if this is the only location and the best location, I'm reluctantly voting yes.
Mayor Palazzola?
Yes.
And with that, I believe that's everyone. The motion passes. Mr. Fay, congratulations. You now have the design review to face.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any additional new business to come before the commission? Do we have any old business to come before the commission?
Mr. Chairman, it's not old business, but the mayor brought it up about our Tennessee One Task Force. I'll have to say that I have some connection with that, with Chief Saunders going down as part of that, but, and they are back in Memphis, arrived about 15 minutes ago. They did an excellent job, I think, down there in St. Charles. They stayed in a jail cells down there. It was a new one. They didn't have any prisoners they had to put up with, but they worked about 16 hours a day. And if I remember right, they handled about close to 10,000 calls and searches. So hats off to that 25 guys that went from the Memphis area.
Amen. And just let me echo that that group is on a moment's notice. They go anywhere and everywhere, and they do an outstanding job. I don't know where we'd be without them. Any other old business?
No, but I will just quickly state this. Our little piece of the volunteer state is even more volunteer than any other place.
Thank you, Mayor.
Amen.
I ask that everyone remember to stay social distance and wear your mask.
I got my sign too, Mayor.
We are adjourned. We are
Thank you,
adjourned.
Mr. Chairman. Good job in the virtual environment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We survived.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.